It doesn't have to be hard, right? I think sometimes we make things too hard. You can study and pass this exam in as little as 30 days. And I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do and how I did it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Tamisha, and this is Tamisha Tutoring. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how I was able to study and pass my exam within 30 days with a 462 on my first attempt. Now, I don't recommend that you only study for 30 days, but if you have to, if you just don't have the time, maybe your test exam date is coming up and all you have is 30 days to study for it, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Normally, I try to tell people give yourself about 8 to 12 weeks max for your studying so you don't overwhelm yourself. Because when you try to compact studying in 30 days, it's definitely possible. You could definitely pass, but it requires a lot of discipline. It requires consistency, and it requires having a proper strategy. Okay? So I'm going to give you 2 to 3 things that you should consider if you are in a position where you want to pass this exam within 30 days. Okay? So I graduated May 2012, and then I studied all of the month of June, and then I went and took my exam in July of 2012 and found out in July that I passed my exam. And then by the time I would say like September 2012, I was licensed and I was off working, and I actually started out, my first job was actually a travel therapy job. But I'll talk about that in a whole different video. But yeah, I was able to do it in 30 days, right? So I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do if you're pressed for time and you only have 30 days to study. So the first thing you really have to understand is what is your study style and your study preference. There is a difference. And I tell my students all the time, there's a difference. You have your study style, which means that you're either a kinesthetic learner, you're an auditory learner, or you're a visual learner. I myself is a visual learner. Now, out of these 3 components, you have one that's dominant and you have the other ones that's not as dominant. We are all a makeup of all 3, okay? So for me personally, I'm a visual, then I'm kinesthetic, and then I'm an auditory learner. Okay, that is my study style. Now, when it comes to my study preference, we can all have different study preference, even if we're a visual learner, right? So, for example, me, because I'm a visual learner, I really love to use whiteboards. Okay, so when I'm studying, I will read whatever information I'm looking at, then I'll write it out on the whiteboard, and I'll also talk it out so I can also hear myself. But as I'm writing it out, it's like I'm teaching to myself. And then what I do is I erase it and see if I could write it out again to see how much I remembered and I recalled. Okay. Whereas other people that are visual learners really do well at looking at pictures, really do well at looking at videos and diagrams and infographics, things like in that nature. So that is an example of being the same study style, but a different study preference. Okay. So that's the first thing, figuring out what you are and how you learn best. Now, of course, you can still use the other, kinesthetic and auditory. Like I said, when I write on the whiteboard, I like to talk out because I like to hear myself. Okay. Kinesthetic, how I incorporate that is because I'm actually going through the physical motion of actually writing out the information. So it's giving me that feedback that I need. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would do to prepare is I would really understand the proper recall strategy. And the recall strategy is going to look like this. You're going to read it, write it, recite it, then repeat it. Okay. So again, you're going to read whatever information that you're utilizing. Make sure you have a really good resource, right? Then you're going to write out the information. Okay. Write it out in your own words. Try to put it in layman terms so you can understand it, so you can recall it. Then you're going to recite it. So you're going to practice that over and over. I already give you an example of how I did it when I would write on the whiteboard. Then I would repeat it out to myself so I could hear myself, and then I erase it and I do it again. Reciting it is a key component because that's what helps to build in active recall. That's also what helps to get it in your long-term memory bank. Now, it's also helpful too that when you're doing this, you're not just doing it at that one point in time of study and then you move on to something totally different. You may need to go over it daily, right? Have a component where you're looking at it daily and building a connection to that information, and then you're just repeating that same process when you have something new, right? You're reading, you're writing, you're reciting, and you're repeating that process. Okay. And then the third thing that you can do is what I call my 4 quadrant rule. Okay. So you want to start with whatever areas you feel weak in. Okay, well, let's say your weak areas, and then you're going to build up to the areas where you feel strong in. So, for example, how does that look like? So, imagine you have a quadrant, and in each of those quadrants, in the first one, you're going to put whatever you're weakest at. I know for me, when I was studying, my weakest point was pediatrics, so that's going to be my first box. And I would say after that was probably maybe, I would say business, right? And then after that, let's say mental health, and then lastly, geriatrics. Geriatrics was my strongest point, hence the reason why I went into geriatrics after I graduated. So what is a good idea? It's to start with whatever you feel weakest, right? And you're going to build your study plan, your study schedule, your guide off of that quadrant. So whatever you feel weakest in, you're going to focus on that first to lock in that information before you move on to things that is a lot easier for you. And of course, you still have miscellaneous, which kind of falls under, splinting and different things like that, because you don't want to forget about that, because splinting, different things like that does come up in the exam. But you want to really own in on whatever you feel weak in and really understand what the question is asking you and why, right? That is very, very, very important. So those are my 3 tips on how you can get prepared and pass in 30 days. Like I said, number 1 in recap is figuring out what is your study style and your study preference. Number 2 is really having a strategy when you study. So I mentioned reading, writing, reciting, and repeating it. That's just a strategy to try to lock in active recall. Number 3 is doing the 4 quadrant plan where you're starting from your weakest points to your strongest points, making sure that you own in on those things that is most difficult for you. And within 30 days, if you utilize this strategy, really understanding and becoming more aware of yourself as a learner, it's going to make all the difference, because I do feel like a lot of people don't have proper awareness of how they learn, right? They don't really know how to study. And it's kind of crazy because we're at the college level, and I'm finding that people just don't know how to study. They're not fully aware of their own personal study style, and it's very easy for them to get distracted. And of course, it's very important that if you're someone that wants to do this within 30 days, you have to be disciplined. You have to stick to the plan regardless, right? You need to turn off the notifications on your phone. You need to tell your children, mommy or daddy needs time, communicate with your spouse, plan your study and stick to it. It really, guys, it really requires discipline. And the other component too is, if you're struggling, right, don't struggle in silence. Reach out for some kind of assistance, some kind of help to kind of get you over. Now, if you're just tired of failing and you want to pass this exam, or on your first attempt, or maybe it's your third, fourth, fifth, I don't know, right? Maybe you're a repeat test taker. I want you to come to TamishaTutoring.com. Check me out. I have so many different offerings, from private one-on-one tutoring to our group signature program, which is Tamisha Tutoring Program, which is a 12-week long program where there's group tutoring weekly, as well as content, foundational information. And even if you're not quite there yet, maybe you're still in OTA school, we have academic tutoring, right? We have a adjunct professor that is running that part of Tamisha Tutoring, where she will help you with your OTA school academic work to help you pass your program so you're better prepared for the exam. Now, I do have a webinar coming up. I'm always doing these webinars, so even if you missed the deadline at the time of this recording for that, don't worry, there's always going to be another one. So make sure that you go and you register for that webinar at TamishaTutoring.com/free webinar. All right, so I hope that this video was helpful to help you think about how you can prepare for your next exam. Until next time, guys, bye-bye.